And welcome back. This is your man Warrior, and I am excited today to bring a couple of the developers onto my show to talk about something very specific. You've probably seen many of the videos from other YouTubers on mods and the different changes that are going to be put in place. However, I want to talk very specifically about mod sets and 6-dot mods. I got a couple of guys with me. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hi, so this is Capital Method. I'm a designer and I've worked on a bunch of different stuff for the game, from characters, raids, etc., but most recently on some of the mod rebalance.
And I am CG Fugitive. I started out as a game balance specialist. Yes, we do actually have those here. I've now transitioned to associate game designer, and I've worked also on territory battles, territory wars, and every character to some degree for the last year.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much for joining me. So, like I said, we're going to focus first on the 6-dot mods. And the first question for a lot of people is, when this change occurs, they're going to look into the game and they're going to see something visually that's going to bother them. And that is going to be a color change. Now, I want to talk really quickly on that. If you guys could explain why the color change is occurring, specifically in reference to the 6-dot mods.
Sure. So the color change came about from kind of the core idea for some of the mod rebalance work we were doing, and the kind of the mod slicing feature at its base. The idea was that we kind of arrived at the conclusion of, well, if we're going to be making this system that's supposed to design to help you improve your mods, making it easier for you to tell which mods need improvement is probably a pretty useful thing to have, right? It's hard to make that decision if you don't have that information. And previously the convention had been that we kind of bumped up the color as you upgraded it and added new secondary stats on there, but then decided that wasn't actually that indicative of, you know, the kind of potential of that mod has, right? Like if the mod didn't start with a bunch of secondaries or didn't start with, you know, strong secondaries, and you later, you know, got it that strong by leveling it up, that wasn't going to be quite the same as if you had a mod that already had secondaries on them, so it kind of had a higher baseline starting. And so we adjusted the system so that the color of the mod does not change as you level it up. So if the mod started looking blue, it stays looking blue as it gets stronger, and that way you know kind of where it started, what baseline you're working off of. And it's like that so that as you slice it up, that will improve it, because that really does make up the gap in difference. So from this point on, you would know if the mod is orange, it should be of roughly equal, you know, total kind of power distribution, right? It had every opportunity to be as strong as any other orange mod.
Very cool. So the next question for a lot of people is going to be, all right, there's 6-dot mods coming into the game. How do I get them? How are people going to get a 6-dot mod?
The core thing is the idea that you will get to 6 by slicing 5. So like slicing a kind of top of the line, like an actual orange, so to speak, like 5-dot mod will get you to a 6-dot mod. And there's a number of reasons why we chose to do it that way, but the biggest one being, you know, you can imagine some people might be a little annoyed if they spent a long time investing in and developing and, you know, hand-picking and tuning all of these mod sets for the characters, and then we just release a new thing that completely invalidates it. That would understandably annoy some people, you might say. So we've said, okay, we need to make sure that whatever the system is one that fundamentally, you know, is built off of what we already have, rather than just kind of obsoleting it. And so that's that was kind of the kind of driving philosophy for a lot of the systems that go into the mod rebalance and rework.
Awesome. And I already know the answer to this, but just for everybody else's sake, can you slice anything lower than a 5-star or a 5-dot mod?
No, you cannot. And there was some discussion back and forth, but ultimately decided like that it probably would do more harm than good for kind of the overall, you could call it mod ecosystem, when you consider that how much easier it is to get mods lower than 5. And when you also consider, like, you know, like any system like this, you know, an acknowledgement of that, slicing would be a lot cheaper at the low end of the curve, but that would pretty quickly lead to a pretty significant inflation of power across the board, because nearly anything you have in your entire collection, no matter how easy or hard it was to get, could become a viable, you know, top-end mod, and relatively not that much harder than if you had just started at 5 in the first place, in terms of, you know, what it would reasonably cost and how many upgrades it would take to do. it ultimately just made more sense to have it be primarily the top end. Again, it's part of it is paying respect to the amount of effort and time and that people have kind of sunk into, all this precision tuning on the existing mods they have.
Right. And so with this, you're going from a 5 dot to a 6 dot. There's got to be some cost associated. Can we talk about that? And then also the items that you're going to need to farm. So you'll take credits and these farmable items, put them together on a 5 dot and get a 6 dot. What does that farming look like? How hard is that going to be? And what's the cost associated?
So not going to go into super detail just yet on exactly what those are costing and whatnot, but the high level is there are new materials that you're able to get. There is a new a tier to the mod table that the materials come from, and that's the baseline of it, right? There is a new material that you get from this new table, and that is what you'll use in various combinations to slice up your mods.
And on a 6 dot mod from a 5 dot mod, what's changing? What exactly are you getting when you upgrade? What's going to happen to your current stats, and what are you getting that's going to add to the existing stat?
So we, when we were trying to figure out the balance of 6 dot mods, one of the things that we really wanted to do was bring up all of the stats that are currently seen as useless or at least less viable, such as offense percent, defense flat, whatnot. We wanted to make more mods valuable and viable and more competitive. So we went through the stats for all the secondaries, all the primaries, and then the set bonuses. And we evaluated which are currently dominant and don't need as much of a boost, and which ones are currently lacking and need a very large boost. And so we went through, and these things, most of these percent secondaries saw a significant increase so that they can compete with the higher level of protection and health that we have on characters nowadays.
Right. I think that a good kind of a good way of looking at it is one of the kind of the guiding ideas we had was trying to make more success states. Right. We knew that it's like at the most kind of cynical interpretation of mods, you could easily see someone saying something like, if it doesn't have a speed secondary, it's crap. Right. And the goal was, even if we weren't necessarily dethroning speed or making it, and we certainly weren't making it bad, the idea being that there should be more end results of a mod that you say, well, that's actually useful, right? It shouldn't be that the only way a mod is ever good is if it has secondary or a secondary speed. And so that was kind of a key part, is bringing everything up as much as made sense to kind of to even the playing field a little bit more. It's worth noting, and I want to make sure this is very clear, is that if a mod had a good roll on a stat before, it will still have a good roll on the stat after it goes up to 6. And if it had a bad one before, it still is bad after. So example being, like, if you had a mod that had a very high defense roll at 5A, obviously not a whole lot of people put a lot of value in defense mods before this update. But if it had a very high roll after the upgrade to 6, that roll will actually be a lot higher. You'll notice it'll be higher. Proportionally, it's the same kind of quality. If it was a mediocre defense roll, it will still be mediocre relative to other 6 dot mods after the upgrade. And so the idea is that the kind of, I guess, like the proportional quality of what you get is maintained in the upgrade to 6. It's just that how good is better.
So basically what I'm hearing is we're not going to be able to do really anything with our 4 and below, but for 5, we're going to be able to farm for some pieces on a new part in the game that will be released. We're going to mix that up with some credits. We're going to upgrade. We're going to get some balancing to that mod. It's going to get stronger, and it's only going to benefit the player in that sense. We're not sure of drop rates yet, but hopefully we'll get more information on that. And it should really bolster something. If it was started off strong, it will finish strong. But if it was started off kind of as a weak roll, it'll kind of have the same, if it started weak, it'll end weak kind of thing. So you're still going to have to analyze your mods just a little bit to determine which one are most valuable to invest your credits into. So let's move from the 6 dot mod, since we know how to get it and where we're going to get them. And let's move to set bonuses. And set bonuses are really cool. should actually be the easiest thing to understand, but I find a lot of people, especially with my hundreds of roster reviews I've done, that really don't understand set bonuses quite, when to do them, when not to do them, how many, all that. And I wanted to go into the set bonuses because they're changing, at least most of them are, and I'm pretty excited. This is probably my most favorite piece of the upgrade, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the first question is, how is this going to affect my existing mods? Because when this update goes live, there are going to be a bunch of existing mod sets I already have, and explain how it's going to impact those existing mod sets that I already have on my existing characters.
Sure. So the existing sets will be they're also being rebalanced, and none of them are getting nerfed. None of them are going down. It's a similar situation to the secondary stats, where the stats that were most in need of love are going up, and the ones that were already fine aren't getting touched. And the general idea is, there's a lot of things we did in kind of the quality of life updates and kind of the menu updates for mods that were about making mods more accessible, right? Like, as I'm sure you've probably noticed, there's a lot of people that don't really understand how to interact with mods that well, or how to use any kind of amount of strategy with them, or how to optimize them. And having those parts of mods become more accessible was another part of our goals for this update. And we looked at it and said, okay, well, the part of mods that is kind of the most most surfaced to the player, like it's the most like direct and in your face, and doesn't have a whole bunch of other variables or feeding into it, or little asterisks, or like, well, you have to remember this one specific thing about how this works, was the set bonuses. And so we said, it makes total sense. We should put some of that power that we're trying to bring in with this rebalance. It made sense to put a significant amount of that into the set rebalances. And so that kind of drove our philosophy of which ones are getting tuned up. And that this one does affect mods across the board, not just like constrained to 6 or 5, because that's something that is already shared across every mod at every kind of tier of quality. And so we felt like, well, it'd be really weird if we added this one more conditional or one more wrinkle to the system of it only starts applying after a certain tier or something. Anything you want to say to it?
No, I think one of the things we did keep in mind when we were increasing a lot of the set bonuses was not invalidating character abilities, both leaders and uniques, that emphasize potency, tenacity, crit damage, crit chance, things like that. We wanted to make sure that those abilities stayed impactful and viable, which is why some of the increases might not be as high as you might initially expect. But in our balance testing, we noticed a significant increase in the impact of potency, tenacity, offense sets, crit chance sets, etc.
Very cool. And that was basically kind of my next question. Which of the stats that are changing do you think will be most impactful into the game moving forward?
There's some of them that are going to be very impactful, obviously. And I think there's some that are going to take people a little while to figure out they're going to be a big deal, right? I think the people pretty quickly are going to pick up on, like potency and tenacity sets can actually make a difference, right? If you have a character who, it's a blowout if they get, stunned or something on turn 1, then you'll probably notice pretty quickly, oh hey, if I run a tenacity set and my opponent's not running a potency set, that's going to happen a lot less often. And then likewise, if you have a character who gets blown out if they can't land some critical debuff early in the fight, a potency set, and if they're not running tenacity sets, it's going to make a really big difference, right? And even if you're running both, it roughly cancels out, not quite. And it makes it towards something that's now a point of consideration instead of kind of assuming it's all going to go one way or the other. The one I think that people are going to take a while to figure out, simply because the math is not super obvious. There are going to be a significant number of characters who their defense is at a kind of a magic break point that a defense set is actually going to make a bigger difference for them than like a health set. It's going to improve their survivability more than if they had just gone for raw health or just gone for raw protection. Defense is, I think, going to be a bigger a bigger deal from a set wise perspective. I think it's just going to take a while for people to notice.
As far as the changes, what do you see as the greatest benefits of changing these mod sets overall? Just the greatest benefit and any possible downside to these changes?
surface level thing we present to mods is like the first thing that should be like clear about like what benefit you're getting from your mods. And I think with this rebalance combined with some improvements to how we message that and how we kind of clue players into that value, like the mod recommendation system, I think it's going to make it easier and more exciting for people to get into mods that might not have gotten into mods otherwise. They'll be able to see this clear thing of like, oh, this is a cool system that lets me tweak my characters and make them better. I can see this clear like thing I can do that makes them better by matching these sets. And then when you do that, pretty much no matter which set you pick, you will see a noticeable improvement. And I think that is only better than where we're at before.
My favorite part about this whole rebalance is simply the fact that at the more in-depth level where I reside, it gives you a lot more flexibility and variety in how a character is built. Currently, most characters just say pile on the speed and then whatever else I get, I get. And with this, after this rebalance, I think a lot of attention is going to shift away from speed and more onto tenacity, defense, potency, as you start trying to counter your opponent's character modding, and then they have to counter your counter, and you kind of have this back and forth interplay.
Tenacity in the past hasn't been completely worthless, but it's definitely not been as strong of a set bonus as potency, just because of the inherent abilities of something that's debuff. So I'm really excited to see all of the changes, especially the additional bonuses of tenacity that are bigger than the potency bonuses, that could really make tenacity an extremely viable option in the future. And it has been more just recently. I noticed a lot of the new character development, starting with like CLS and Thrawn, and then Kanan, and Bosk now, and there's a lot of new characters now that give a huge bonus to tenacity. And then with these additional tenacity changes, I'm really excited to see where that goes, because you can really shut an opponent down now, potency wise, if they don't do it right. So it's pretty cool. Just the last thing is, this is just my final thoughts on it, and then I'll give you guys the last word. My final thoughts on this is the set bonuses aren't getting any worse, they're only getting better. And the best part about this, regardless of whether you're free to play or whale, is everything you have will be increasing in some way, because all of your set bonuses will either stay the same or get better. Now, why this is important, because you're probably thinking, well, so is everybody else in the game. How is this benefiting me? I mean, I get better, but they get better. It's because there's PvE content, which is like half the game. So instantly, overnight, your characters are going to get a stat boost that's going to help your entire roster in all PvE content, because you're going to wake up one day instantly overnight and have characters with better stat bonuses, which is going to immediately make all of your characters slightly better, which should help the overall durability versus PvE. Pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited about that. Any last statements on either 6-dot mods or set bonuses?
There's some part of me that always has the most fun working on improvements to an existing system, finding those little points of friction that we can remove, finding things that make us say, well, we should have just done this to begin with. But of course, no one would have thought to do so if we'd not, already had it live and playing with and see what it actually feels like in the wild. And finding little places to just generally make a system more interesting, more lively to interact with. And that is what I hope we're accomplishing with this set, or with the set bonuses, with these rebalances, with this expansion to the system. I'm looking forward to seeing people interact with it and play with it and just discover new things about how to build their characters.
I think the thing that I'm most looking forward to with this is simply the amount of theory crafting that can go into the competitive side of the set bonus changes and the 6-dot mod rebalancing. The amount of variety that we're going to see, and just the different counterplay strategies that we're going to see. I think I'm most excited to see what the community develops with those.
Yeah, and the community is very smart. It's amazing what they come up with, isn't it? It's pretty awesome. Thank you both for coming on to my channel. I appreciate it very much. If anybody watching has any questions about the mods, the specifically 6-dots or mod sets, which is what we covered today, leave them in the comments down below and we'll get back to you for sure. As always, keep your gaming on. Warrior out.